Good afternoon, Chamber members. For those of you I have not yet met, I'm Sabrina Binkley, Head of School at Spruce Tree Montessori and Chair of the Fairbanks Chamber Board of Directors. I'd like to take a moment, as we do each week, to thank our executive partners whose logos you saw on the screen before we began our program today. These businesses provide a rock-solid foundation for the Fairbanks Chamber to be successful throughout the year. Their support is not only financial. These businesses share knowledge and experience that really help shape and direct our advocacy efforts and create awareness that drives economic strength and growth for Interior Alaska. A full list of our executive partners can be found on our website. We'd also like to give a special shout out to Mac Federal Credit Union today for sponsoring today's presentation. We're so grateful for the continued support of our member businesses who help us make these weekly presentations possible. We'll hear from them later in our program. And now, Brenna, would you please welcome our new and renewing members?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sabrina. So today we actually have a new member that we'd like to welcome to the membership, and that's North Star Tutors. They're a locally based business that's new to the business scene, and they're offering tutoring virtually in all education profiles, as well as music lessons. So that's something new and unique to check out if you are currently homeschooling, which I know a lot of people are. And then we'd also like to thank our renewing executive partner, Lockheed Martin Corporation. We're very thankful for their continued support and partnership. We'd also like to thank the following renewing members: ABR Inc., Alaska Center for Children and Adults, American Heart Association, Ann's Greenhouse, Attaboy Awards, Catholic Schools of Fairbanks, Elks Lodge, Fairbanks Nissan, Fairbanks Resource Agency, Fairbanks Shakespeare Theater, Godwa Bookkeeping, Handy Hour LLC, iView Local Union 1547, Image Optical, Interior Graphics and Printing, Kevin McKinley, Machines Carpet Plus, Mechanical Contractors of Fairbanks, Minto Development Corporation, Northland Children's Choir, Omni Logistics, Shriners Hospitals for Children, Spokane Division, Tega Adventures, Tanana Valley Farmers Market, and Wedbush Securities. Thank you for renewing your membership. We'd also like to thank and welcome some new members to our 110% Club, which means that these members went above and beyond their normal contributions to help us with our advocacy actions. And that's Alaska Fuel Distributors, Interior Community Health Center, Madden Real Estate, Minto Development, North Star Behavioral Health, Riverboat Discovery, Rose's Cleaning Service, Steve M. Thompson, Sumitomo Metal Mining America, and TCI Construction. Thank you for renewing, and thank you for your continued advocacy support. In today's membership minute, I'd like to talk for just a moment about a new feature that we've added onto our ribbon cutting ceremonies. So now that people are not encouraged to gather due to health risks and safety, we've actually added a new benefit to our ribbon cuttings called the 20-minute questions. So this is a Q&A session where we ask business owners and operators 20 questions about their business, what they love about Fairbanks, Interior Alaska, and our business community, so that you can get a sneak peek into their business and who they are as business owners and representatives. If you'd like to sign up for a ribbon cutting, reach out to myself or Katie Yarrow, or just call the Fairbanks Chamber office at 452-1105. Thanks, and back to you, Sabrina.
Great, thank you so much, Brenna. So please note that the Fairbanks Chamber's 5 advocacy committees are in the process of updating the Chamber's advocacy agenda in preparation for a presentation to the board at our next board meeting on October 19th. I do want to encourage all members to make a plan to vote this year. We all see each year the low voter turnout in our local elections and across the nation. Let's challenge ourselves to improve turnout. You can do that by making plans to vote and then understanding what you need to do to ensure a successful plan. If you're voting in person via early voting, if you're voting via absentee ballot, or if you're voting on election day, figure out the day and times that you can vote, or the final day and time you can get your absentee ballot cast to ensure that it will be counted. Be sure to get your questions answered by calling or visiting either the website of the city or borough clerk's office, or simply call us at the chamber for help. This week, I've decided to bring back my reflective prompt. I thought I'd share a quote I came across in notes from a leadership seminar I attended last January. You know, when the new year was still new and great, and we were all still trying to accomplish resolutions, setting goals and expectations for ourselves, our work, and our businesses. This was what we now call pre-COVID, of course. The quote really spoke to me then, but when I read it yesterday, it shouted at me. Jack Welch, former CEO of GE, a chemical engineer who became a legendary businessman, in fact touted as one of the great business leaders of the century, said, "If the change inside your organization is slower than the change outside your company, the end is in sight." I feel like right now changes are in a swirl, both inside and outside our businesses. And while consistency is often named as a key to success, our ability to survive in today's COVID world requires us all to swirl as well, with creative ideas, critical thinking, and bold debate. The world is changing fast, Chamber members. Are our companies, industries, and public institutions keeping pace? And with that, I'll turn it over to Marissa for her President and CEO report.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. I know here at the Chamber, we have definitely been trying to keep up the pace here. So it's an interesting reflection. I'll look forward to noodling on that here later this afternoon. We do have a full house here today. I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief. I do want to recognize that we have a couple of other presenters on the line with us. After our main presentation, we're going to hear from our sponsor, of course, from Mac Federal Credit Union. We'll also hear from the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation with the results of their most recent business survey and the impacts of COVID. And then finally, we're going to hear an announcement, small presentation from Golden Heart Utilities. So after our main presentation, I encourage our members to stick around. I think you're going to learn even more after our main presenters. I do want to just point out too, we've got 2 membership events happening later this week, an increasing trend of ribbon cutting opportunities that we've had over the last few weeks, and we've got 2 this week. So first, we will be celebrating with Kinross Fort Knox, celebrating the opening of the Gilmore Project, where you can tune into that on Facebook on Wednesday, which is the 30th, that's tomorrow at 2 p.m. You'll get to see learn a little bit about that project and also see some exciting mine action. I know Brenna and I are really excited to be able to do this one. It's going to be very different from any ribbon cutting we've done so far. And then the following day on Thursday in the morning at 9 a.m., make sure that you join us again on our Facebook page. We're going to be with Westmark Fairbanks Hotel and Conference Center for the live unveiling of their newly renovated lobby. And it's a very beautiful space. I haven't even seen it myself, so I'm excited to be able to see that on Thursday morning. So not only will you get to see their lovely new space, but you'll also hear from them on their COVID updates, so that in an effort for them to provide you as their customer COVID conscious catering offerings and practices. And then like Brenna said, you can check back, make sure that if you don't already, follow us on Facebook, and you can check back for those 20 questions interviews with both of those members and get even more information. They've done, I think, 2, Katie and Brenna have done 2 or 3 of those videos so far, and they're really fun. You can find past editions on our Facebook page as well. You can find more information about any of our events and programs on our website at fairbankschamber.org. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Sabrina.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marissa. I can't wait to see the new Westmark lobby. I know they've been working hard on that this summer. Now for our main presentation. As a business advocacy organization, the Fairbanks Chamber has been paying close attention to the process of reopening schools safely and quickly in our community. We've heard from members about the challenges they, along with their employees, are facing in the wake of the pandemic in our community. For many, a closed school means reduced opportunity to work and economic hardship resulting from that challenge. The Fairbanks Chamber sent a letter to the school district at the beginning of the month supporting the reopening of schools following the guidance of the state's Smart Start Plan and the CDC guidelines. You can find that letter on the Fairbanks Chamber website and in yesterday's edition of The Scoop that came by email. Dr. Gaborik and Dr. Nace both came to speak at our Education and Workforce Development Committee meeting a few weeks ago to help the group understand the process. The conversation was so helpful to the members of the committee, and because so many of those members have expressed interest in a better understanding of the process, we invited Dr. Gaborik and Dr. Nace to come and present to our larger membership audience today. We're pleased to have Dr. Karen Gaborik and Dr. Michelle Nace with us to share how the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District, with support from the Medical Advisory Committee, is addressing the needs to safely and quickly reopen schools in 2020. Dr. Karen Gaborik has been an educator in Fairbanks since 1995. She was named superintendent in April 2014, and her current contract extends to June 30, 2021. Dr. Gaborik has earned numerous awards throughout her career, including Alaska Superintendent of the Year, Alaska Principal of the Year, and the Personalized Learning Pioneer Award. Administrator since her years as a building administrator, and is currently past president of the Alaska Superintendents Association. Dr. Gaborik earned her National Superintendent Certification from AASA, the School Superintendents Association. Welcome, Dr. Gaborik. Dr. Michelle Nace received her medical degree from the University of Washington, Seattle, and completed her residency at UW's Children's Hospital and Medical Center. She is a board-certified pediatrician and the current medical director of the Tanana Valley Clinic Pediatric Department. She has been with TVC since 1996 and is the mother of 3 children. In her free time, Dr. Nace enjoys spending time with her family, running, and traveling. Welcome, Dr. Nace. Welcome, both ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Very much appreciate the introduction, Sabrina. My name is Karen Gaborik, Superintendent of Schools here in Fairbanks. And I have a couple slides that I'll show, and then I'll probably shift to just, speaking to the group directly. And after in fact, I'll put a timer on myself to make sure I limit my comments so that everybody can hear from Dr. Nace as well. It truly is a partnership with the school district and our medical advisory committee headed up by Dr. Nace as we work our way through COVID. So as you can see from the opening slide, our interest is bringing students and staff back safely to the classroom as soon as possible. I just want to, on the next slide, I just want to point out, right there, if anybody is interested in digging into the Smart Start guidelines, those are available on our website. I'll refer to them occasionally, as will Dr. Nace. This particular document that is being shown right here was produced by the Department of Education. It's based on Department of Health and Social Services guidelines, which is based on guidelines from the CDC. So this document right here is the school district's foundational document in terms of all of our return to school planning. And then the next slide, if you go to our main website, you can see that button up at the top. It's on all of our main pages, everything related to school startup. That will get you to this basic landing page, and there's all kinds of resources there. So again, if you're interested in digging into what some of those guidelines are, how the risk zones are determined, after you listen to Dr. Nace today, you can go back and dig into that a little bit. Health services, safety protocols, of course, learning options, and all those things. So if you'd like more information, start on our main webpage, hit that yellow button, and then you can dig into your heart's content into all the resources that we have. That's all that I need for my slides. So when we switch to Dr. Nace, I know she'll have some slides as well. So I guess the first thing I want to say is that I want to start with what our reality is as a school district, and of course, everybody in the community is experiencing this. COVID-19 is a very fluid situation on every front, right? There is not a single area of school district operations that we are not challenged by changes every single day that COVID-19 brings us. So when people say to me, things keep changing, why is that? I say, yes. That's the answer. Yes, things keep changing. And because things keep changing, we get new information, whether it's new guidelines, whether it's the case rate, the transmission rates, whether we learn more as we move through different stages of implementation of opening schools. We're constantly learning every day, we're constantly adjusting, and we're constantly getting new information from the state and national level as well. The challenge is, this is always a challenge, right? We tend to have amnesia in terms of what we've gone through, and we also tend to look back at decisions we've made with this 2020 hindsight vision, and we seem to be doing that even more during this COVID-19 time. And it's just, I think we just all have to remind ourselves that we made the best decisions based on the best information we had at the time that we had it. 2 weeks later, oh, well, there's new clarity, there's new information, there's new insight as you go. It's really hard to apply in general in life, but especially right now, what you know today to past experiences. But we continue to do it, and so we just, I guess it's my plea to everybody to offer all of those who are in the school district, staff, families, teachers, administrators, principals, grace as they work through. There's so many firsts. Everybody's having lots of firsts, and then, we refine and figure it out. So one question I get is, what were you guys doing last spring? Like, why weren't you planning for this? And so remember, last spring, we were thrust. We had 1 week to plan and prepare to stand up some sort of virtual learning environments for students. So our entire focus was dealing with last spring. We actually began our planning for this school year in early May 18th, after students left. And so we pulled together what I called a design council. And it was a core group of 30 people, and it had stakeholders from across our district. So it had school principals, it had teachers, it had support staff, it had district program managers. And then we had parallel groups running throughout the summer that included representatives from each of our unions. So from the support staff union, from the teachers union, from the principals union, doing parallel work, taking what the design council was developing, taking it back to these feedback groups, and then, completing that feedback loop and giving us input as we went along. We also had community focus groups every single week that anybody was open. Of course, they were all virtual, but anybody was welcome to attend and give feedback to. So we were planning. We all thought, we were super optimistic, and we thought school would start in yellow. We were thinking green, right? We thought yellow might be a worst case scenario. We were thinking we'd start in green. And then the July holiday hit, and the transmission rates in the community and across the state started to spike, and our reality completely shifted. And so then it became quickly apparent that we may well be in red, which turned out to be the case. And so we had to shift from our optimistic view of, well, we might be in red occasionally throughout the school year, to no, that's how we're going to start the year. And then also right before the majority of our staff started coming back on July 27th, the Department of Education and DHSS updated their guidelines, their Smart Start guidelines. And those new guidelines were much more restrictive than the previous guidelines. And there's two things that our schools have just been struggling with ever since those guidelines came out in terms of developing plans and trying to figure out how to implement. That's the 6-foot social distancing rule, and then also the cohorting rule, which involves keeping groups of students in small enough groups so that if you have a positive case in one group, as small a number of contacts of students and staff are impacted as possible. So in our elementary school, what they're working on are these small pods of students in a larger cohort. And the idea is that if we have a positive case in a school, and we're doing our job, that at maximum, hopefully, we'll have 45 students and then some other staff who are impacted and may have to go home and quarantine, those being close contacts. We're also working on that same type of model at the secondary level. All of that's based on the CDC guidelines. Now, here's a question that comes up. We hear it in the discussion at board meetings. We hear it anytime we go out into the community and do outreach. Well, okay, do you really need to follow the CDC guidelines? So here's the challenge with that. First of all, we've had positive cases in our schools already. We've had students, we've had staff. I'll give you those numbers in just a minute. The very first question people ask is, did you follow the rules, right? My kid is sick, my kid's going home, my kid was a contact, did you follow the rules? And the frontline people being scrutinized are the principals and the teachers and the staff involved with that. So we need to follow the rules because we are accountable to parents and to staff and to their family members when these positive cases happen. The other thing is, with regard to insurance, as of July 1, almost all the major insurance carriers across the planet specifically listed COVID-19 in their exclusionary clause, which this means that coverage does not apply to any loss or expense related to claims arising out of actual or alleged transmission of COVID-19. So think about this from a business perspective, and not that numbers and finances and risk should be the only consideration. But when the claims start to come in, Again, it goes back to what guidelines did you follow? Because, if we decide we're not following the guidelines, right, all that will go through court. It'll be like the reasonable person decision. Did the school district respond reasonably? Did they implement, a reasonable plan? I'm going to assume that all of that's going to go back to DEED, DHSS, and CDC guidelines. If we move outside of those guidelines, then the district is potentially incurring, considerable risk and potentially considerable financial loss. So it's just something to, that has to be in the back of your heads. We also hold we're a government entity. We hold a greater level of responsibility in all things, and especially during this time of COVID. We're held to higher standards. We're used to that. That is also our reality here, as we consider opening schools. We have, a huge responsibility in this community in terms of, from a public health perspective. We have 13,500 students. We have 2,000 staff. All of them have families and friends. And so our transmission rates within our school district, within our classrooms, again, will have an impact on the community. So we're extremely cognizant of that. We also have 2 military installations. Correct. We have schools on those military installations. We have people and students moving off and on those military installations. We have to be cognizant of the impact that positive cases that may or may not start with the school district, move through families on the military installations, and what impact that might have on their military readiness. We've already experienced situations where positive cases that have popped up in the school are having ripple effects in terms of the readiness and ability of soldiers to respond, and they're having to deal with those situations on the installations. So I wanted to talk just about a couple more things, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Nace. The school board at the last school board meeting approved a motion to open elementary schools if we're in the yellow zone next week, potentially starting October 5th. Our medical advisory team committee meets every Thursday and makes the decision regarding what zone we're in as a district. We call it the operational zone for the district. Dr. Nace will talk about that. So this Thursday, if we're in the operational zone, which is looking like it might be fairly unlikely given the transmission rates, we would start school next Tuesday for elementary. Staff have requested 2 work days to get ready for that. As we march our way toward middle schools, the school board approved an opening date of October 19th. So that the same process and scenario would play through. High schools, the school board's still having discussion about high schools, and they will continue that conversation on October 6th. A big piece of that conversation will be the high schools are struggling with how do we implement the CDC guidelines and have kids in schools. And so it's really going to be a conversation around where are we willing to move on that? How many kids can we have in school at the same time, and also follow the CDC guidelines. So I just want to say, let's see. So let me just give you an update on our numbers, and then if there's other comments and there's time at the end, I'll add a couple other things. So far, now this was as of yesterday morning. We've already had more added to this, but I don't have the official counts yet. So we've had 5 positive student cases. As a result of those, we've had 32 kids in quarantine status. We've had 13 positive staff cases, and the quarantines that we're aware of, and we're not always aware of all of the staff quarantines because there's a bit of a public health overlay there. 43 staff have been in quarantine. We've got 8 schools or buildings that have been impacted by positive COVID-19 cases. So we're building a dashboard, and that will be up on our website soon so that folks can see at least the number of student positive cases and staff positive cases. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Nace.
So if you could advance the slides to where I start. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Michelle Nace. I'm a pediatrician at Town of Valley Clinic and Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. And I am part of the partnership with the school district, as are other members of the medical community, to help guide our school district and our community back to getting those kids back to in-person learning as soon as we can safely do that and manage both the mitigation part of it to get our kids back where we want them to be. So I'm going to go through a couple of the questions I've been asked are based a lot about how are we making the decision about the red zone and when it's safe for our kids to go back. And I wanted to point out for those of you who haven't is the DHSS website here that you see on your screen. And this is the state's ability here to indicate when we're in the higher zones and the lower zones of safely. Now, if you look at the details of this, from this, this is largely also based on CDC recommendations. The school districts themselves have adopted this protocol. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see how Fairbanks is. This is the case rate matrix, and Anchorage has one and Fairbanks has one, and it's geared to the population that we have. So if you look in depth on the Fairbanks one of the convenient things about Fairbanks, because case rates are how many people are positive percentage-wise over 100,000 people. And what the nice thing about Fairbanks is our population is very close to 100,000 if you include the catchment area. So our numbers are very close to 100,000. So if you look at this average case rate matrix, you'll see both the state of Alaska, and yes, they have a red and kind of an orange and a yellow, and we have the red, yellow, and green, based on how we determine one of the indicators if we're in the red zone or not. So the definition for our high rank, which is up there, the red, is that if we have 10 more than 10 new cases per day averaged over 14 days, then we can say that we are in the high zone, or what we're known as the red zone. And so that number is the one that we track on the website. And then there's the yellow zone, which we have between 5 to 10, and then the green zone, which is less than 5. And again, this is not just a daily average, it is over a 14-day time period that we use that. Now, this matrix and this number is just one, but a strong one of the metrics we use to make those decisions about when it might be safe to have kids in the school setting. It is not the only one. If you look under the medium section, it also gives you a few more metrics as we might use, such as where are those positives? Are they isolated to a particular area? How has it affected our staff or a particular school? Are we going up? Are we going down? And are there hot spots that we might need to address and factor into those decisions? So there are other things that are factored into that decision of whether or not we're in the red zone. But the case rate is a significant part of the safety, making it and allowing us to help decide if it's safe to bring our kids back to in-person school. So if you go to the next one, if you also look on this website, the DHSS website, this one is just a snapshot of what the current levels might be. And it goes over time and over the date to express where we are. And you can look at the different time periods on this particular slide to say, when are we in the red zone? When are we firmly in the red zone? When were we last in the orange or the yellow, to give you a better indication. You can look at it both from the Fairbanks North Star Borough and from the state on this website, which is accessible to all. And this just shows as of yesterday where we were as Fairbanks. And you can see we are significantly into the red zone and kind of stably staying up there after our recent increase and not showing an indication that we are dropping down. There are different things we use to say, hey, are we going up or down? And we also use what's called the 7-day. By looking at the most recent 7 days of that 14-day average, we get an indication whether we're going up or going down. If our most recent 7 days is higher than our past 7 days, we know that we are trending up. And that's how we kind of use to make part of our decision making. If we can see our most recent 7 days is a lower number than the first 7, we can say, up, we're kind of trending down lower. Perhaps we'll get into the orange zone or yellow zone. And you can look at the numbers right now and say we are not significantly going in that direction at this time. So go ahead and go to the next one. So some, if you, you can see that from the, this is a slide showing that from the school district, you are also able to get this information if you don't go directly to the DHSS. And it also includes the most recent numbers. And those were numbers from yesterday in terms of what our rates were. And again, remember, our goal is to be 10 or lower. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So something that happened just last week was the release from the CDC, what we call the indicators for the dynamic school matrix. And some people saw this and thought, okay, wait, our numbers are way different than what they're using. So if you look at their core indicators, the number of the new cases per 100,000 are significantly greater than what we might be using. And so if you're to break that down, you can also see instead of 3 colors, they're using the 5 panel. This is not meant to replace our decisions. This is meant to be one more metric that you can use. And as a district, decide if you are, what mitigation steps you are doing and how can we help you if you are in the higher zones to be more ready. So if you look at the first line on there where it says the number of new cases per 100,000 over 2 weeks, that is a different number because that's their total number over 2 weeks. So if you want the exact number, you have to take the CDC guideline and divide that number by 14. And then you will find that their numbers are very similar to what we're using in terms of our green, yellow, and red numbers. So this supported that what we're doing is very similar to what the CDC is recommending. And the state of Alaska also agreed that this very much follows what we're currently doing and gives us some additional information, including it also includes the percentage positive, which you see that's the next number. And what that is an indicator of basically answering the question, are we testing enough? Are we getting enough, both positive and negatives that say that we're testing enough to truly represent what's in our community at that time? And so if you look at our percentage positivity, which as of yesterday was about just over 6, between 6 and 7, that says that we have a lot of percentage positive, and we ideally would like that number to be lower. That says we are truly testing enough so that our positives represent what is out in the community. The last of the steps on the CDC recommendation are the mitigations and the different steps that we can be using. And those are ones that we are already using, but it's a good reminder of what we can be doing as a school district as well as a community to help with our mitigation steps. And those would be things about using masks, hand hygiene, social distancing, and having effective contact tracing. And to have effective contact tracing, as we know, we need to have the numbers. And that is an area where we are working towards, and with our public health, to get enough out there who are doing that contact tracing as well as testing. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. So part of another question we get is, what is the medical advisory committee, who is on it? And this gives a list. This is a combination between medical advisor, including physicians, the head of school nursing, which is Lori Schneider, in addition to also some key members of the school district team. We meet together. We also talk about the different issues. How are we doing? Where do we need different assistance? What do we think about what's going? What different steps can we take? And making that decision about what zone we are actually in. So we work together in a partnership with the school district. We have been, I've been incredibly impressed with the different mitigation that the school district, both their resources that they're doing, and when they don't have something they need, being able to ask and recognize when they need more assistance. There are areas in which, as Karen said, constantly changing. This is the new way we figure to do something, and then once we get it set up, the rules change, the recommendations change, and then we have to be agile with that. We do know that our goal is to get kids back in school. Our goal, we know that is essential to their development, their well-being, beyond just education, but in terms of their safety, the reliable nutrition, the extra resources, the mental health, the physical therapy, the physical education. All of that is important, but we are also having to manage that with returning kids to school in a safe way for the kids, for the educators, and for the community as well. And so what we need is our community numbers to come down so that we can also safely and effectively get our kids back there for in-school learning. It's almost like I'm a doctor and I keep wanting to say inpatient. So if there are any other questions in the chat, or if, that you have any, we can try and answer those questions for you.
Okay, thank you, Drs. Gabork and Nace, much appreciated. So yes, we will now take questions from our members through our online chat. So you can type your question in and we'll get to as many as we can. Janelle, would you please facilitate those questions, please?
Will do. So we do have a few that have come in so far. One of them this is probably for Dr. Gabork. So district enrollment was down reportedly 10% or 1,400 students during the early September board meeting, amounting to an estimated $7 to $10 million reduction or loss of funding from the state. Do you have an updated figure at this point, and what cost-saving measures have been put in place for the 2020 school year in response to this decrease?
Thank you for that question. So we're actually in the middle of our 20-day count, which is will provide the basis for our budget for next year. There's actually new communication out from the Department of Education, and I don't have it in front of me. Districts around the state have been advocating for basically a hold harmless clause because the 20-day count, of course, drives what the revenue from the state and other entities, the local as well. And so we're asking all districts are asking for a hold harmless clause, and communication came out last week. I believe that the department is in support of that. So we'll see how that transpires moving forward. In terms of cost saving measures, there's some places where we're saving money just by the nature of how school looks in a time of COVID. So one example is how much money we're spending on substitute teachers. That's not a cost that we're incurring right now, not nearly at the rate we normally would. When people ask, well, have you cut staff? The answer is no, we have not cut staff, because teachers are teaching, and we have 3 different learning models, whether it's the in-person blended, whether it's remote, whether it's homeschool through Fairbanks Best, and support staff are providing support. Instructional staff, of course, providing support to teachers. Facilities staff continue with maintenance and operations and with daily cleaning. And so we have not reduced staff. And so staff is our major cost. So there are small cost savings that are resulting. We have not made significant cuts or cut particular programs. We are reviewing every single position that comes open to determine if it's a position that needs to be filled to serve the mission, the academic mission of the school district, or if it's essential to operations. And if not, we're holding back on those. We will know, so it'll be the end of October. It'll be, probably early. It's about mid-November before the team is done looking at all the numbers, and we'll know what our final count is.
Okay, you mentioned the hold harmless clause, and I apologize if I missed it, but can you just kind of briefly tell people, what does that mean? So
anticipating, based on what our 10-day count was, and the previous question indicated that there was a significant drop in our number of students enrolled in the district. So the request from the Department of Education is use last year's 20-day count in terms of determining what the funding from the state will be, what the revenue from the state will be. And rather than using a perhaps greatly reduced number from this October. And here's part of the challenge. We know, many of our families have told us, when we get through this and when COVID is over, which we're optimistic perhaps that will be in the next few months, that many students are going to return back to us. So, it's just an interesting place of, you don't have a significant number of kids now, but you have families telling you that we will have those students again once this is over.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question is, you've both mentioned the partnership between the school district and the, health advisory committee. Is that a paid relationship, or is it a contract relationship? How does that work?
No, that was Superintendent Gabork begging the medical community for help. And again, right, because clearly you don't just want one person. You don't want the superintendent, and I can look at the data like everybody else can, and deciding what operational zone the district is in. You want, the medical side of the equation. You certainly want public health involved, and it was just wonderful that Foundation Health Partners and Dr. Nace reached out and said, we will absolutely work with you on this. So I don't know if Dr. Nace can speak more to on her end how that works, but we are not paying any of the advisory committee members for their services. But I don't know. I don't know if there's job release agreements on their end or not. No, she says no.
So this is Dr. Nace. No, I'm a volunteer. There's no obligation. There was no requirement that I did it. This was something which we did because it needed to be done. And I think that as a partnership that we are better able to do this together. I don't think either of us could do this on their own. So.
Okay, and I know that in our discussions with FHP, we've certainly heard a lot about how important it is for all of the pieces to be working together, the business community, the medical community, the school community. So we've certainly heard a lot about that it is a mission-driven item, that the more we can improve the health in the community, the more all of us will benefit. So definitely have been hearing a lot of discussion about that. Okay, so a question about what went into the decision to allow sports teams to start practicing and playing before in-person classes resume?
So those decisions were made actually way back in early June. The Athletic Association, the statewide athletic association, ASA, started working on the sports issue very early, right away, because fall sports often have summer practices, so out of season practice. So ASA developed a series of guidelines that allowed for sports teams to begin those out of season practices. And we started in Fairbanks. We were fully up with out of season, I think, by mid-June. Lots of requirements around that. Every single team, every facility, every field, indoors, outdoors, there had to be very specific mitigation plans in place as per ASA guidelines, which again were based on CDC and DHS guidelines. ASA worked as a state organization, worked very closely with Dr. Zink and her group on developing those guidelines and those mitigation requirements. And so we started with sports. My personal opinion is that I think that's been a really good touch point for us. Again, our whole approach in this district has been to slowly walk our way toward opening schools, and to have groups of students starting to interact together, and staff, coaches and those things, and sort of to figure out how we could do this, how to scale that has been really helpful. And we've had learnings with sports as we've gone along. And actually now, we are in a phase-in plan with students, so special needs students, starting with our most intensive students, and then moving down the list as schools are able to, special education students with varying needs. Each school is determining their capacity and their ability to serve special needs students, and also students who are vulnerable in lots of different ways, as identified through federal programs, or they just absolutely have no connectivity at home. Different factors playing into students getting access right now to schools in a very sort of step-by-step measured approach.
It's interesting, we were just having a conversation this morning in our Government Relations Committee about broadband access as a necessary part of our infrastructure in 2020 and potentially going forward. I don't know if you have any numbers available or at your fingertips about the percentage of students who don't have that access, or how many folks in the district that's affecting.
Yeah, we did. I don't have it with me right now. The numbers are not, in terms of absolutely no connectivity, the numbers aren't as large as perhaps we had originally anticipated in the spring. Those percentages came in lower, but it really has to do with the quality, right, of that connection. And then the family situation. So if you have 3 kids at home who are attempting to do online learning and mom and dad are working from home, so yeah, I have great connectivity until I do that, right? And then that is really challenging. So we've been working with families. We've purchase MiFis for some of our families through federal programs. We've had the question like, why can't the district, provide internet service? Well, we have to be very careful once again to not compete with, the other local companies in terms of we can't be an internet service provider. We can certainly advocate, we can partner, and lots of that happening right now. And then again, when we started to open schools in this phase-in plan, get our families who just absolutely had no connectivity at all to start bringing those in to school. Devices, we have done a good job on devices. That's something we were able to purchase thousands of devices and get those into the hands of students and families that needed them. Again, last spring, people realized, well, it's not great. I mean, my 6th grader and my high school student really just can't share a device. They each need their own. So really trying to beef that up for families.
Yeah, anyone who's tried to buy a webcam recently knows how tough that market is right now. Okay, on a bit of a different topic, I guess related though, has the district looked at all into creative or different use of the spaces that the district has available? For examples, you hear about some districts across the country maybe using high schools as temporary classrooms for middle school students or elementary to allow that more of that distancing and then have the older students continue learning from home for a longer period.
Mm-hmm. We talked our way through that, and the general, or actually the overwhelming feeling from schools was that they wanted to use the footprints that they have. That being said, significant amounts of furniture have been moved and stored in our elementary schools so that they can create more space in classrooms to create that social distancing and those cohorts. And again, not wanting parents, if your school is University Park, parents not necessarily wanting their, student to go to West Valley, right? Their kindergartner to be at West Valley. And I don't know that would be the example, but right. I mean, they want their students at their home school. So elementary schools, they're ready. When we move into yellow, elementary schools are ready to receive all their students. Now they'll be in those small learning pods. They're using every square inch of space possible in the building. They're using gyms and libraries and commons areas to create the social distancing and the learning options. Middle school is scheduled for, again, if we can move to yellow, to come online on October 19th, and they're also using all their space. The big challenge with high schools is those unstructured times and how you deal with the staffing and specifically like lunch. So again, even at a 50% model, let's say you have 500 kids in a building, how does lunch work? And how do you make sure that staff get their lunch breaks, lunches get delivered to kids? How do you contain the movement of students so that all of a sudden we're not, again, if there is a positive case that we won't have, 300 close contacts. We're trying to keep those numbers small. So.
You mentioned numbers. I think you definitely said it earlier, but just maybe to emphasize, what was the number of students that you're servicing and staff, just to have those numbers in our minds?
Are you talking about positive cases or total students overall?
No, just the number of students that the school district is serving and the number of staff involved, just to have an idea of the number of people that you're coordinating here.
Sure. So we have about 13,500 students, and we have over 2,000 staff. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's helpful to think about the scale for us, trying to process all of this. What can communities that make up the greater Fairbanks area do to help get schools back open? So I don't know if this is intended as a health question or a school question exactly, but maybe you could both, if you have a couple of tips.
I will let Dr. Nace answer because it's really all about community transmission.
Yeah, so it's going to go back to the same things that we've been educating on, is hand hygiene, wearing masks when you're in public, social distancing to the best of your ability, cleaning and disinfecting areas, and as well as having, as a community, effective contact tracing and a testing available. So all of those things together are the mitigation steps. So it's that there are all these different steps that if you apply them all together are going to make your most effective plan. And so there's some areas which you can't do some of those things. So that makes another one of those steps more important. So using all of those mitigation steps together are the best and most effective tools we have to be able to get our community numbers down.
I don't know, Dr. Nace, if you wanted to show that last slide, if it's possible, because again, it's the positive case has the ripple effects. And so I think it's important for people to understand what that looks like when you start looking at isolation and quarantine issues.
Yeah, so there's the last slide that it's one more pass there. And this is just some different terms to be able to go on. And so I wanted to bring them up. And it's the difference basically between quarantine and isolation, which are different, and they're sometimes used interchangeably, but they're far different words. So quarantine, isolation first is 10 days. And isolation, that is to keep someone who has an infection, who you know is COVID positive, from others so they don't infect others. And so that's a 10-day time period when they are kept separated from others. Quarantine is different. It is keeps someone who may have been exposed away from others while we're waiting to see, do they get sick? Are they sick or not? Are they COVID positive or not? And that's for 14 days. And how that can get difficult is that how you can remember the difference. How I do is isolation, you means I am sick. I have COVID. So they both start with I. Quarantine is question. I don't know if I have it or not. So I need to do this for 14 days. So that's how I kind of try to use to remember the difference between them. Now on that, then you have the next thing, which is close contact. Now the thing with a close contact is this is the person, this is an individual. And it has to be defined in some ways. And here's the way it's defined. If you are within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes or less cumulative time, then you are considered a close contact. That is the general rule. And then by cumulative times, I mean, it could be 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. It doesn't mean that every 14 minutes, if you run away and then come back, that you're not a close contact. It's 15 minutes of cumulative time during the time in which that person was in their infectivity point. Now that time period is 48 hours prior to symptom onset. So it doesn't just start the day of their symptoms, it starts 48 hours prior. So that is why contact tracing is so important. There are, so what can happen with a family, what can happen with the school is how this just spreads. So you can have one student who is positive. And if there are others after determined who is that close contact, that they are in quarantine, now that can start affect another different bubble at home and other social groups. So it can spread. Plus you can think if you have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old who is a close contact and go home, how do you parents quarantine themselves and that child? You need to take care of that kid. So if that kid becomes positive, then the parents are then quarantined as well. So it spreads from place to place. But understand the difference between isolation, which is keeping a sick person from others, and quarantine, which is someone who is in question if they're going to be positive or not for 14 days, makes a difference. And if you get tested during your quarantine to see if you're positive or negative, if you get a negative test, that does not change your 14 days. No amount of testing during your 14 days, no negative test will change the 14 days. You are still quarantined for 14 days, regardless of a negative test result.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think that's really helpful because certainly we've all heard these terms many times in the last few months, and it's helpful to know the difference between them. We do need to move on to the rest of our program, so I'm going to cut off the questions there, but we'll definitely keep in touch with the district and the medical community as these questions continue to come up.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Gaborek and Dr. Nace, for your generous time today. We know you're certainly both very busy, but this information is really useful to the business community. So thank you for being with us today. Moving right along, I'd like to now welcome Josh Bunch with Mac Federal Credit Union to share a sponsor spotlight. Josh?
Thanks, Sabrina. This is Charlie Lanelli. Josh had another engagement, so I jumped in on his behalf, but I thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about Mac Federal Credit Union today. At the heart of Mac Federal Credit Union is a strong volunteer organization. And so during these turbulent times with COVID, and after hearing from Dr. Nason, Dr. Gabork about the fluidity and how everything is changing, I wanted to bring up some of the things about volunteerism in this community and the continued needs for it. As a financial institution, we strongly support our employees to volunteer. And internally, we have a program called the MacPack organization, and they're able to organize and gather safely and contribute to certain organizations that still are in desperate need of volunteerism. Some of the strong ties that we have within the organization or within the community are related to the Rescue Mission, Fairbanks Youth Advocates, Breast Cancer Detection Center, and the United Way. But there's still a very strong need out there. And so as we start to roll into winter, and if our COVID numbers decrease and the kids are able to start going back to school, there's still going to be the need for this advocacy in the community. And so if there is a desire for any organization that's watching, or that is a part of the chamber, or that is if you have friends or other groups that you're a part of that is looking for the opportunity to volunteer, on our website at macfcu.org, we have what's a community outreach tab that you can go on and you can sign up for, and you can be part of this organization. It's just not an organization that's there for our employees or our members. Anybody in the community can join, and you can find out more about what's going on in the community and other ways to participate in volunteer opportunities. So thank you, Chamber. Thank you, Sabrina, for giving Mac Federal Credit Union the opportunity to sponsor today. And again, that was macfcu.org, our community outreach tab, and then sign up on the contact page to receive more information about volunteering in the community. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Charlie. I'm sorry, I got your name wrong in my script there. Thanks so much again to Mac Federal Credit Union for sponsoring today's presentation and for the offer to volunteer. I appreciate that sentiment. Now we will hear from Michelle Deckard of Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation with the results of their recent COVID-19 Business Impact Survey. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Again, I'm a project manager with FEDC, and us with a couple other entities in the borough, including the chamber, just really wanted to sort of take the temperature of businesses and how they were sort of dealing with the COVID impacts. So we implemented 2 surveys, one in May and one in September. Next slide, please. The first survey, again, was out in May, and when we sort of thought we were in the middle of it, or towards the end of it maybe, and we're sort of just looking at how our businesses were impacted. I'll go over these results a little quickly. 91% of the businesses that took the survey found that they were impacted by COVID-19. And at the time, 16% of the businesses were at risk of permanently closing because of COVID-19. And again, this was as of May 19th, so I'm sure these numbers are a little bit different and probably a little bit worse now. A lot of them saw a decrease in revenues and not too many employment reductions, thankfully, but were definitely affected. We also asked about the federal assistance, which again, at the time was the only assistance available. So 50% or 58% of businesses had applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, 30% had applied for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and Advance, and 12% had applied for other funds. There was another SBA loan available and some other national quick grants that were available at the time. And this sort of beginning survey just sort of gave us a temperature and a baseline to go forth and sort of realize that our businesses need a little bit more local and specific help and assistance. Next slide, please. And now we're in September, right? So things are still happening and our businesses are still being affected. So this survey was open from the end of August to the beginning of September. So that being said, there's a little bit of a caveat that the AK Cares was changing their eligibility right in the middle of our survey. So some people probably took the survey and they were not eligible for AK Cares and that sort of thing. And it was also right before FNSB went live with their program. So please keep that in mind. But we were looking for a lot of different information, but basically mostly about the local assistance and how our businesses were sort of looking towards the future. So businesses that had applied for federal assistance, 44% of those also applied for the AK Cares grant program, and 28% had also applied for the City of Fairbanks programs. And this sort of goes to show that like assistance programs are not a one-stop shop to get our businesses back up on their feet. It's really going to be a combination and sort of a modge podge of different assistances to get them back to at least 2019 revenue and operating procedures. We also asked about decrease in revenue. So we had asked that on the first survey, and we sort of wanted to loop back around with that. If people were still seeing a super decrease, or were they seeing at least something similar to last year, or were they, doing okay? And we were pretty surprised that 44% of our local businesses were still seeing a decrease below that of last year's number. So they were still struggling. Rounding back again to the federal programs, 17% of businesses had started the repayment or the forgiveness process for those federal assistance programs. So that's great that we're getting that started. Again, local assistance, we wanted to know what was helpful, what was working, what wasn't working, and again, taking into consideration FNSB and the AK Cares at the time. The most helpful for the ones that participated in our survey was federal funding, followed by city funding. We then sort of asked a little bit towards the future, right? And 37% of businesses were unsure that there's adequate assistance available at all for their business to survive this pandemic. So this sort of going forward, there is still definitely more that we can do to help them. And 77% of businesses are concerned about what's going to be available in 2021. So most of these assistance programs that are available right now, they have to be spent and dispersed by the end of this calendar year. And again, COVID's not done with us. So what's sort of going to happen, come January 1 when there's expenses and things happening that there's no assistance for. We ended the survey with some sort of open questions about what the businesses would like to add about what's working, what's not working, and if they had any suggestions of programs that would be beneficial to them that weren't focused on just one big pot of money to be dispersed. And the biggest takeaway from that is to keep supporting local, to keep buying local, and that, in April and May, we were really gung-ho, but it's still happening, and we still need to be focusing on supporting our small and local businesses. That in turn also turns into sort of a more stimulus. So these businesses are now open again, but they're not really seeing their customer base returning. If they had 30 to 40 customers a day and now they're only seeing 5 customers a day, it's really hard for them to keep that cash flow going. Rapid response testing was a pretty common thing, when these small businesses have to close down because certain people on the crew need to be tested or someone was positive and sanitized. It really affects their operation. Extra assistance specifically for tourism and hospitality. Like we said, 2021, no one knows what's going to happen, but we know that the tourism and hospitality industries are still going to be impacted, and there might need to be some specific assistance for those industries. And the last thing, loss of revenue assistance. So all of these federal financial assistance programs right now have really specific rules and regulations of what you can and cannot use that money for. So these businesses that are not seeing the customers coming back, that were closed for a couple weeks or months back in the spring, they're not seeing that revenue. So they can get their expenses reimbursed, but they're not getting that revenue back. So again, thank you for letting me sort of go through these statistics really quickly, but the takeaway is that we still need to be supporting local and spending our money in our local economy, especially with the holiday season coming up. Just remember to shop small first before you go to Amazon. Thank you.
Great advice. Love it, Michelle. Thank you for sharing that perspective with our business community and for sharing the survey numbers. It's very interesting. And finally, I'd like to welcome Steve. Steve, thanks for your patience. Steve Offenborn of Golden Heart Utilities to share a proposition that will be on the city ballot for Fairbanks residents in the October 6th election coming right up. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you for having me today. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to talk about Proposition A. It'll be on the ballot next week on Tuesday on October 6th, and how it will help our community out. So Proposition A is going to allow us to the city of Fairbanks to borrow $1.5 million on behalf of Golden Heart Utilities. We can switch to the next slide, actually, please. So what this will do is The proposition will allows the Alaska Clean Water Fund to finance projects. And since the city of Fairbanks actually owns the wastewater treatment plant, we actually lease that from them. They have access to those funds, which we don't. Now, because they have access to those funds come at a very low interest rate, which is 1.5%. Now, compared to the funds that we are able to get at, that will actually reduce your rates, because if we use our funds that we have available to us, it'll actually be much more expensive. So if we want to switch to the next slide. So past projects also that we've used these funds for are the sludge to water facility, the hypochlorite system, and the clarifier rehabilitation project. So just kind of FYI. So we have some problems with our current process water system. So the funds that on Proposition A are actually going to be used to build a clean or a drinking water line to our wastewater plant, and also rehabilitate our process water system. So currently our process water system at the wastewater treatment plant, so it contains or it is supplied through 2 wells that are on the site, and then our domestic water actually comes from a 3rd well. So the problem with these wells is that they have extremely high concentration of iron in the well water. And what that does is it leaves a lot of deposits in a lot of our systems. Now, when we have all these deposits, what it does is we have a lot of expensive treatment plant systems, and it gets in those systems, it gets in our process water piping, and it sticks around in those pipes, and it's extremely hard to get out. Also, our wells, so they fail, I don't know, probably every 5 to 10 years. Now, when a well fails, it that's why we have 2 wells, is for redundancy. Now, we have to go back and rehabilitate that well at a very high expense. The other expense too is actually a lot of our equipment that we have in our plant. The high iron, it gets in all the small nozzles, it gets in all of our pipes, and it restricts flows to all of our equipment. So lots of maintenance. Running a wastewater treatment plant is a super expensive process. So if we can switch to the next slide, we're going to talk about the loan repayment. So with these projects, when Golden Heart Utilities and the city team up, Golden Heart Utilities fully pays the loan back, plus interest and any other costs that the city of Fairbanks incurs. So this has a 0 impact on the city of Fairbanks. GHU also will pay a 0.5% loan inception rate to the city of Fairbanks. So they will get $7,500 just for GHU initiating that loan, which is fairly nice to the city of Fairbanks. So like I said earlier, so the Alaska Clean Water Fund offers a lot lower interest rate on loans compared to using conventional financing that is typically used by the utilities. So which basically comes out to it equals lower interest rates equals lower utility bills. If we want to switch to the next slide. So the benefits to the ratepayers of the city of Fairbanks. So a no vote will increase utility bills approximately 0.98%. A yes vote will increase utility bills 0.27%. And a yes vote will actually allow us to use a $500,000 subsidy that has been awarded to the project through the Alaska Clean Water Fund. So that was, I believe it was awarded back in July. So it's going to take a $1.5 million project and actually make it just $1 million project. So it's going to be a huge, benefit for the city of Fairbanks ratepayers. So reasons this project's so necessary for the wastewater treatment plant. So the process water system, so it takes a lot of water to clean dirty water. And the process water system feeds all of our critical infrastructure at the wastewater treatment plant. So a few of these systems are dewatering centrifuge, so which basically removes a lot of the solids that are in our water. The polymer mixing system, which actually helps coagulate all the solids that are in our dewatering centrifuge, and that helps make the sludge that comes out of our plant. The bar screens, so those remove solids down to 1/4 of an inch out of our wastewater influence stream that comes in. Pretty much I want to say about every 2 weeks, we have a 15-yard dumpster, and we take about 8 to 10,000, or 8 to 10 tons actually, so about 20,000 pounds of rags out of our plant. And this water, this high concentration, of iron, so it takes all these bar screens and it plugs them up, and if they don't, perform as efficiently as they would if we had when we have a clean water system down there. So our hypochlorite system, that is a system that produces bleach. It produces or a hypochlorite solution, which is basically like your same household bleach, just a little bit stronger. That is a disinfectant, so we disinfect our effluent water. Plant wash down, so as you can imagine, our wastewater plant gets pretty dirty. We definitely use a lot of water during our plant wash down. We use it. We have a system of hoses all over the place. We use it to clean out our chlorine contact chambers, our clarifiers, and any other part of our facility that needs to be cleaned up. Other things that you wouldn't normally think about, just potable water for our crew and our laboratory, which we have a lot of sophisticated equipment that requires cleaning and maintenance. And even our restrooms. So if you want to switch to the next slide, please. So I have a few pictures to show just kind of how much iron is actually in our wells at our wastewater treatment plant. So this is a picture of our processed water clear well. As you can see, I think the processed water clear well, it's about 25,000 gallons when it's filled up, but all the sludge at the bottom, that's all iron that has come out of the water from our clear well. We do go down there with our processed water and clean this out, but it's empty right now at the time. But I mean, as you can see, our water is a lot of iron deposits in it. So, and this is all water that hasn't gone through our processed water system. So I want to switch to the next slide. This is a fitting from our processed water system. It's a MJ fitting that basically we took apart, and you can see all the iron deposits in it. If you want to switch to the next slide, please. So this is I actually have this piece of pipe sitting on my desk right now, and I opened it up and made a huge mess on my desk. But this is a 1.5 or 2-inch piece of PVC pipe that actually feeds all of our processed water system. As you can see, those are all iron deposits inside, and if you can imagine, that's probably maybe a 3/4 inch of like a garden size hose, and that's what our processed water system has been restricted down to, and why it's so critical to replace this aging plugged up system. So if you want to go to the next slide. So I just want to thank you guys for your consideration to vote yes on Proposition A on October 6th in 2020. I appreciate you guys' time, and if anybody has any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. And just, for lower utility rates, please vote yes on Proposition A. So.
Great, thank you, Steve. Boy, interesting data and information, and the photos are certainly compelling too.
Yeah, it's a project that we have to complete this year, and we're just trying to make sure our rates stay down as much as possible for utility customers. And it's a great project to work in this conjunction with the city of Fairbanks.
Yeah, sounds like a great partnership. And I'm a fan of clean water and lower rates, so I think you've helped me to decide how to vote today. Thanks for being with us. A note of gratitude in closing today to you, our viewers, Dr. Gaborik, Dr. Nace, Josh, Bunch from afar, and Charlie Leonelli, who joined us today, Michelle and Steve. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today and sharing the knowledge you possess with our membership. We are so proud to be able to provide a platform where these important topics can still be communicated with not only our local chamber, but the greater Fairbanks area community as well. Thank you for being with us. We hope you'll continue to join us each Tuesday. Next week, we'll be back with our political forum series, and we'll feature a presentation about ballot measure 1. So thank you, Fairbanks. Let's get back to work.